Black woman adopted 4 boys nobody wanted. 30 years later, they did something shocking. The social worker's voice crackled through the phone like she was delivering bad news about the weather. Mrs. Johnson, I have to be honest with you. These aren't your typical foster children. We're talking about 4 boys, ages 8 to 12, with extensive behavioral records. Loretta Johnson shifted the phone to her other ear and continued stirring the pot of chili on her stove. At 43, she had been a single woman for most of her adult life, working double shifts at the hospital and weekend cleaning jobs just to keep her modest 2-bedroom house in order. The idea of taking in 1 child seemed daunting to most people in her situation. For troubled boys? That was something else entirely. What kind of behavioral issues are we talking about? Loretta asked, though something in her heart had already made the decision. Well, Jamal is the oldest at 12. He's been through 6 foster homes in 2 years. Doesn't talk much, spends all his time drawing these intense pictures. His last family said he was unsettling. Then there's Tyrone, 11 years old, caught stealing 3 times, has a mouth on him that could make a sailor blush. The boy challenges every adult he meets. Loretta nodded, jotting down notes on the back of an envelope. Go on. Malik is 10, book smart but angry. Tested into gifted programs but keeps getting suspended for fighting. And Andre, the youngest at 8, barely speaks. Speech delay, they think, but he also has these outbursts when he gets frustrated. Loud ones. The social worker paused, and Loretta could hear papers shuffling. Mrs. Johnson, I have to ask, are you sure about this? 4 boys with these kinds of issues? Most families won't even consider one of them, let alone all 4 together. But Loretta was remembering her own childhood. Growing up with a grandmother who took in every stray cat, every neighbor kid who needed a meal, every soul who knocked on their door looking lost. They need to stay together? She asked. Well, ideally, yes. They've been together in the group home for 8 months. It's the longest stable situation any of them have had. But honestly, we've been preparing to split them up because no one wants. I'll take them. Silence on the other end. Then, Mrs. Johnson, did you hear what I just told you? These boys have been rejected by. I heard you fine. When can they come home? 3 weeks later, on a gray Tuesday morning in March, a white van pulled up outside Loretta's small house on Maple Street. The neighbors had been whispering for days. Mrs. Henderson from next door had actually cornered Loretta at the mailbox. Loretta, honey, you're barely keeping your head above water as it is. 4 boys? For troubled boys? What are you thinking? But as Loretta watched 4 small figures climb out of that van, each carrying a trash bag of belongings, she knew exactly what she was thinking. She was thinking about the way Jamal's shoulders hunched forward like he was trying to disappear. About how Tyrone's swagger couldn't quite hide the fear in his eyes. About Malik clutching a book to his chest like a shield, and little Andre hiding behind the social worker's legs. Boys, she called from her front porch. Welcome home. The first month was chaos. Pure, unfiltered chaos. Tyrone tested every boundary she set. When she said lights out at 9, he'd sneak his light back on at 9:01. When she said no cursing in the house, he'd step 1 foot outside the door and let loose with words that made the mailman blush. He stole cookies from the kitchen, money from her purse, and once, memorably, tried to borrow Mrs. Henderson's garden gnome. Why you taking us in anyway? He challenged her one evening after she'd caught him trying to jimmy the lock on her bedroom door. What you getting out of this? Loretta looked at this 11-year-old boy, all sharp edges and defensive posture, and saw something that made her heart ache. What makes you think I have to get something out of it? Everybody wants something. Foster parents get money. Group homes get funding. What's your angle? My angle, Loretta said, sitting down across from him at the kitchen table, is that you deserve better than thinking every adult in your life is trying to use you. Malik was different. Brilliant and furious, like a storm trapped in a 10-year-old's body. He'd read everything in the house within 2 weeks, then complained loudly that her books were elementary and boring. When she brought home library books, he'd devour them and then quiz her on the contents, clearly frustrated when she couldn't keep up with his rapid-fire analysis of advanced mathematics or scientific theories. The fighting started at school almost immediately. Not because Malik couldn't do the work, he finished his assignments before other kids had sharpened their pencils. But when teachers talked down to him or classmates called him names, his fists flew faster than his brilliant mind could stop them. "They think I'm stupid because I'm in foster care," he told Loretta after a particularly bad day that ended with a 3-day suspension. "They think we're all damaged goods." "Are you?" Loretta asked quietly. "What? Damaged goods? Are you?" Malik's anger flickered, replaced by something more vulnerable. "Sometimes I feel like it." "Well, I've worked in hospitals for 15 years, Loretta said, pulling out a chair for him. "And I've learned something about broken things. Sometimes they heal stronger than they were before." Andre barely spoke for the first 6 weeks. When he did try to communicate and couldn't find the words, his frustration would explode into screaming fits that shook the windows. Loretta would find him afterward, exhausted and ashamed, hiding under his bed or in the closet. But she noticed things. How he'd carefully set the table without being asked. How he'd bring her small gifts, a flower from the yard, a smooth rock, a picture torn from a magazine. How he'd stand quietly beside her while she cooked, absorbing everything like a small, silent sponge. "You don't have to be perfect at talking to be perfect at caring," she told him one evening as he helped her fold laundry. He looked up at her with eyes that seemed far too old for 8 years, and nodded. And then there was Jamal. 12 years old and carrying the weight of being the oldest, the one who'd seen the most, been disappointed the most times. His drawings covered every surface in his shared room, dark, complex images that spoke of pain and loneliness, and dreams too big for the paper to contain. "These are incredible," Loretta told him, studying a sketch of a city made entirely of musical instruments. "You have a real gift." Jamal shrugged, but she caught the tiny smile he tried to hide. "Art school," she said suddenly. "After high school. We'll figure out a way." "Foster kids don't go to art school," Jamal muttered. "Says who?" Working 2 jobs while raising 4 boys should have been impossible. Loretta's day started at 5 a.m. with breakfast preparation and ended near midnight with laundry and bills. Her back ached from her hospital shifts, her hands were raw from cleaning office buildings on weekends, and her bank account ran on fumes and prayer. But somehow they made it work. Birthdays in the Johnson house became legendary on Maple Street. Loretta didn't have money for fancy parties or expensive gifts, but she had creativity and determination. Tyrone's 12th birthday featured a treasure hunt around the neighborhood with clues written in code, because he loved puzzles, even if he pretended not to. Malik's 11th was a science fair, in the backyard with experiments made from household items. Andre's 9th featured a talent show where communication came in any form, drawing, dancing, humming, anything but words. And Jamal's 13th was an art gallery in their living room, with his drawings professionally framed. Loretta had worked extra shifts for 2 months to afford it, and neighborhood kids invited to a museum opening, complete with punch and cookies. "How do you do it?" Mrs. Henderson asked one evening, watching through her kitchen window as all 4 boys helped Loretta plant flowers in their small front yard. "I mean, really. How do you make it look so what? So much like a real family?" Loretta paused in her weeding and looked at her boys. Tyrone was showing Andre how to dig proper holes. Malik was explaining the scientific properties of soil composition to anyone who'd listen. Jamal was sketching the scene in his ever-present notebook. "Because it is a real family," she said simply. The transformation didn't happen overnight. There were still bad days, still calls from school, still moments when Loretta wondered if she'd bitten off more than she could chew. But gradually, the house on Maple Street became something none of them had experienced before, a home. Loretta established only one non-negotiable rule, and she said it so often it became like a family motto. "If you ever make something of yourselves, don't forget to lift others." She'd say it when they complained about chores. "You're learning responsibility so you can lift others someday." She'd say it when they struggled with homework. Education is power, and power should be used to lift others. She'd say it when they were kind to a younger kid at school or helped an elderly neighbor. See? You're already learning to lift others. The boys rolled their eyes, but the message sank in deeper than any of them realized. By the time Jamal graduated high school, something extraordinary had happened. 4 broken, unwanted boys had become 4 young men with dreams, ambitions, and most importantly, unshakable confidence in their own worth. They'd learned to believe in themselves because one woman had believed in them first. One by one, they left for college, for jobs, for lives that stretched far beyond the small house on Maple Street. Loretta hugged each one goodbye and whispered the same thing. Remember where you came from, but don't let it limit where you're going. She never asked questions about their careers, their salaries, or their plans. She figured if they wanted her to know, they'd tell her. Her job had been to raise them right and send them into the world. What they did with that gift was up to them. But late at night, when the house felt too quiet and too empty, Loretta would pray that somewhere out there, her boys were happy. That they were safe. That they remembered her lessons about lifting others. She had no idea that they were about to lift her in ways she never could have imagined. The years after the boys left were the quietest of Loretta's life. The house on Maple Street, once filled with laughter, arguments, and the constant hum of 4 growing personalities, now echoed with memories and the tick of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. At first, the calls came regularly. Every Sunday, like clockwork, her phone would ring with updates from different area codes. Jamal calling from art school in Chicago, his voice excited as he described his latest project. Malik checking in from MIT, rattling off achievements that made Loretta's head spin with pride. Tyrone's calls came from different countries, first Germany, then Japan, then places she had to look up on the map he'd sent her for Christmas. And Andre, sweet Andre, would call just to hear her voice, his speech now clear and confident, though he still preferred listening to talking. But as the years rolled by, the calls became less frequent. Not out of neglect or forgotten love, but because life had a way of pulling young men forward into their futures. Loretta understood this. She had raised them to fly, not to stay perched in her nest forever. Still, she missed them terribly. The birthday cards never stopped coming, though. Every year on her birthday, 4 cards would arrive within days of each other. Never fancy, never expensive looking, but always thoughtful. Jamal's usually featured original artwork, small sketches of flowers or birds that she'd frame and hang in the kitchen. Malik's were precisely mathematical, with calculations showing exactly how many days she'd been alive and how many more he hoped she'd have. Tyrone's came from exotic locations with strange stamps, brief notes about new cities and cultures. Andre's were simple but heartfelt, with messages that always made her cry happy tears. The visits were sporadic but precious. Malik would show up unannounced on Thanksgiving, still lanky but now wearing expensive-looking glasses and carrying a laptop that seemed permanently attached to his hand. He'd spend hours at her kitchen table, fingers flying across the keyboard, explaining his work in terms she couldn't quite grasp but pretending she understood because his enthusiasm was infectious. "I'm working on something big, Mama Loretta," he'd say, eyes bright with excitement. "Something that could change everything." "That's wonderful, baby," she'd reply, refilling his coffee cup. "Just don't forget to eat while you're changing the world." Jamal's visits were quieter affairs. He'd arrive with a small suitcase and spend days in his old room, sketching and painting. She'd find him on the front porch at sunrise, capturing the light as it hit the maple tree they planted together when he was 15. "My art's doing well," he'd tell her during one of these visits, but he never elaborated. When she asked to see his recent work, he'd smile mysteriously and say, "Soon, Mama. Soon you'll see everything." Tyrone's visits were the rarest but most energetic. He'd blow into town like a whirlwind, full of stories about business deals and international clients. His suits looked expensive, his confidence had grown into something almost magnetic, but he still helped her fix the leaky faucet and complained about her cooking exactly like he had as an 11-year-old. "You'd be proud of what I'm building overseas," he'd hint during their conversations. "Remember what you taught us about lifting others? Well, I'm lifting a lot of people these days. Andre came home most often, usually for long weekends. He worked in finance, he told her, and was doing well. But he was vague about details, changing the subject whenever she asked too many questions about his job. Instead, he'd spend his visits helping her around the house, fixing things that had broken since his last visit, and sitting with her in comfortable silence. What Loretta didn't know, what none of the neighbors suspected, what even Mrs. Henderson with her notorious curiosity couldn't have guessed, was that her 4 boys were in constant contact with each other. Group video calls every Sunday morning, encrypted messages throughout the week, and quarterly meetings that rotated between different cities. They had never stopped being brothers. More than that, they had never stopped being her sons, and everything she had taught them about lifting others had taken root in ways she couldn't imagine. The subtle signs were there, but Loretta attributed them to coincidence, or the kindness of neighbors. When her roof started leaking badly during a particularly harsh winter, a roofing company appeared at her door saying someone had anonymously paid for repairs. When her old car finally died, she found a modest but reliable used car in her driveway with a note from a grateful former patient at the hospital. When she mentioned struggling with rising grocery bills during one of Malik's visits, the conversation was quickly steered toward her garden and whether she'd considered expanding it. When she worried aloud about the heating bill during one of Andre's calls, he suggested energy-saving tips, and then somehow the topic shifted to his childhood memories of her cooking. "You boys don't need to worry about your old mama," she'd say whenever the conversation touched on her finances. "I've been taking care of myself long before you came along." But they were worrying. More than that, they were planning. In boardrooms and coffee shops, in video conferences and late-night phone calls, 4 successful men were orchestrating something unprecedented. They shared financial reports, business strategies, and dreams that had grown far beyond what any of them had dared imagine in that small house on Maple Street. "She gave us everything," Malik said during one of their quarterly meetings. "Literally everything. Her time, her money, her faith in us when no one else believed. And she never asked for anything back," Jamal added. "Never made us feel like we owed her. Which is exactly why we owe her everything," Tyrone concluded. "So we're really doing this?" Andre asked, his voice steady but emotional. "All of it?" "All of it," they agreed. The plan they'd been building for 3 years was finally ready to be revealed. But first, they needed to get Mama Loretta to Atlanta. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning in early spring, 20 years after 4 scared boys had first walked through her front door. Loretta was having her morning coffee and doing the crossword puzzle when she noticed the thick, cream-colored envelope mixed in with her usual bills and advertisements. Her name was written in elegant calligraphy across the front. Inside, she found first-class airline tickets to Atlanta, hotel reservations at a place so fancy she had to read the name twice, and a simple note in handwriting she recognized as a combination of all 4 of her boys. "Mama Loretta, you once gave us a home when no one else would. You believed in us when we didn't believe in ourselves. You taught us that love isn't about what you get, but what you give. Now it's time we show you what we built with the foundation you gave us. The car will pick you up Thursday at 10 a.m. Pack light, we have everything you need waiting. Love always, your boys." Loretta read the note 3 times, her hands shaking slightly. She looked around her quiet kitchen, at the framed pictures of 4 young men at various graduations and celebrations, at the birthday cards still hanging on her refrigerator, at the life she'd built around loving and letting go. For 28 years, she'd wondered what had become of her boys' dreams. On Thursday, she was about to find out that their dreams had become something bigger than any of them had ever dared imagine. Something that would change her life forever. The black town car that picked up Loretta on Thursday morning was nicer than any vehicle she'd ever set foot in. The driver, a polite young man named Marcus, treated her like royalty, opening doors and making sure she was comfortable for the 2-hour drive to the airport. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me saying," Marcus said as they pulled into the departure area, "your sons talk about you all the time. You're kind of famous around the office." "Famous?" Loretta laughed. "Honey, I think you have me confused with someone else. Marcus smiled mysteriously. No ma'am, I don't think I do. The first-class flight was a revelation. Loretta had flown exactly twice in her life, both times in cramped middle seats with crying babies and overpriced peanuts. This was like traveling in a living room in the sky. The flight attendant, a young woman named Jessica, knew her name and treated her like a VIP. Mrs. Johnson, we're so honored to have you aboard today, Jessica said, bringing her a warm towel and a glass of champagne. Your flight has been specially arranged by JLTM Group. They wanted to make sure everything was perfect for your trip. JLTM Group? Loretta asked, but Jessica had already moved on to help other passengers. Atlanta's skyline gleamed in the afternoon sun as their plane descended. Another car, another polite driver, another ride through streets lined with gleaming office buildings that seemed to stretch toward the clouds. Loretta pressed her face to the window like a child, marveling at the bustling city that was so different from her quiet neighborhood back home. Here we are, Mrs. Johnson, the driver announced, pulling up to a stunning glass tower that seemed to pierce the sky itself. Welcome to JLTM Group headquarters. Loretta stepped out of the car and craned her neck to see the top of the building. 40 stories of gleaming glass and steel, with the letters JLTM spelled out in elegant silver across the front. People in expensive suits streamed in and out of the revolving doors, all looking important and purposeful. There must be some mistake, she told the driver. I think my boys work somewhere else. But the driver was already unloading her small suitcase and gesturing toward the entrance. No mistake, ma'am. They're waiting for you. The lobby was like something from a movie. Marble floors polished to mirror brightness, fresh flowers the size of small trees, and in the center of it all, a massive screen displaying a video that made Loretta's knees weak. Welcome, Mama Loretta. The screen read an elegant script, followed by a montage of photos she'd never seen before. Her boys at various awards ceremonies, cutting ribbons at grand openings, shaking hands with people in suits, accepting trophies and certificates. But in every single photo, they were holding small framed pictures of her. Mrs. Johnson? A young woman in a perfectly tailored suit approached her with a warm smile. I'm Sarah Martinez, executive assistant to the founding partners. We are so incredibly honored to meet you. Please come with me. Sarah led her to a private elevator that required a special keycard. As they rose through the building, Sarah chatted excitedly. I have to tell you, Mrs. Johnson, everyone in this building knows your story. The founding partners talk about you all the time. You're an inspiration to all of us. I don't understand, Loretta said weakly. What founding partners? What story? The elevator doors opened on the 40th floor to reveal a conference room filled with at least 50 people, all applauding. Banners hung from the ceiling reading, Welcome home, Mama Loretta, and Thank you for building our foundation. And there, standing at the front of the room in suits that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage, were her 4 boys. But they weren't boys anymore. Jamal, now in his early 40s, stood tall and confident, his artist's eye evident in the way he'd clearly helped design the beautiful presentation. Tyrone, whose rebellious energy had transformed into commanding presence, beamed at her with the same mischievous grin he'd worn as an 11-year-old. Malik, still tall and lanky but now wearing the unmistakable air of someone who'd conquered the world with his brilliant mind, pushed his glasses up his nose in a gesture she remembered from countless homework sessions. And Andre, no longer the quiet, struggling boy but a man whose gentle strength radiated across the room, stepped forward first. Hello, Mama, Andre said, his voice clear and strong. Welcome to what you built. The applause grew louder as Loretta stood frozen in the doorway, trying to process what she was seeing. These successful, powerful-looking people were applauding her? This magnificent building, this company, had something to do with her 4 boys? Boys? She whispered, and suddenly they weren't successful businessmen anymore. They were rushing toward her like children, wrapping her in the kind of group hug that had been their trademark in the little house on Maple Street. Surprise, Mama Loretta, Tyrone said, his voice thick with emotion. We told you we'd make something of ourselves, Malik added. But we never forgot the most important part, Jamal continued. We never forgot to lift others. Andre finished. Through her tears, Loretta looked around the room at all the faces watching this reunion. Young and old, different races and backgrounds, but all of them looking at her with something that could only be described as reverence. I don't understand, she said again. What is all this? What is JLTM Group? Tyrone grinned and gestured toward the massive windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Mama, do you want to know what JLTM stands for? She nodded, still overwhelmed. Jamal, Loretta, Tyrone, Malik, Andre said softly. We put your name right in the middle, where it belongs. Because everything we build started with you. Actually, Jamal corrected with a smile. Andre legally changed his name to Malik years ago. We both go by Malik now. It caused some confusion in business meetings, but we figured it out. You see, Mama, the original Malik explained. We didn't just build a company. We built an empire. Finance, technology, art, education, each of us contributed what we were good at, what you helped us discover about ourselves. And every single person in this room, Tyrone added, has heard stories about the woman who saved 4 unwanted boys and taught them that their worth wasn't determined by where they came from. Loretta looked around the room again, seeing the faces differently now. These weren't just employees. They were people whose lives had somehow been touched by the lessons she'd taught 4 scared children 30 years ago. Some of them, Andre said quietly, were mentored through a foundation we started. It's called the Loretta Johnson Foundation for Youth Excellence. You named a foundation after me? Loretta's voice was barely a whisper. Mama, Jamal said, taking her hands in his. We named everything after you. Because everything we are, everything we've accomplished, everything we've built, it all started in that little house on Maple Street with a woman who saw 4 broken boys and decided they were worth saving. The applause erupted again, but this time Loretta barely heard it. She was staring at her 4 sons, her boys who had grown into men she barely recognized but somehow knew completely, and trying to understand that the empire surrounding her had been built on the foundation of love she'd given them so many years ago. Now come on, Tyrone said, offering her his arm. Let us show you what we built together. The tour of JLTM Group was like walking through a dream. Loretta found herself on floors dedicated to each of her boys' specialties, each more impressive than the last. The technology division, headed by Malik, hummed with the energy of brilliant minds solving complex problems. Rows of computers and screens displayed data that looked like something from a science fiction movie. We developed software solutions for hospitals and schools, Malik explained, his eyes lighting up with the same passion she remembered from when he was 10 years old, and explaining why the sky was blue. Remember how you always said education was power? Well, we're making sure kids from backgrounds like ours get access to the best educational technology available. The art division took her breath away. Jamal had created a space that was part gallery, part studio, part community center. Local artists worked alongside established professionals, and Loretta recognized some of Jamal's distinctive style in the murals covering the walls. We represent artists who might not get chances otherwise, Jamal said quietly. And we donate pieces to schools and community centers. Remember how you always displayed my drawings on the refrigerator like they were masterpieces? You made me believe my art mattered. Tyrone's international division occupied 3 floors and buzzed with people speaking different languages, managing global partnerships that spanned continents. We help American businesses expand overseas, but we also bring international companies here to create jobs, he explained. Especially in communities that need economic growth. Andre's finance division was sleek and sophisticated, but what impressed Loretta most was overhearing conversations about microloans and community investment programs. We don't just manage money for rich people, Andre told her. We help families buy their first homes, start small businesses, build generational wealth. But it was the education wing that made Loretta cry. An entire floor dedicated to programs that provided scholarships, mentoring, and support for foster children and at-risk youth. Pictures lined the walls, graduation photos, acceptance letters to colleges, young people in caps and gowns holding certificates and trophies. This is where it all started, Andre said softly. Every program, every scholarship, every mentoring session, it all goes back to what you taught us about lifting others. After the tour, the boys led her to a conference room on the top floor. The view of Atlanta spread out below them like a glittering carpet, but Loretta barely noticed. She was still trying to process everything she'd seen. "Mama," Tyrone said, pulling out a chair at the head of a long, polished table. "We need to have a board meeting." What now?" Loretta sat down, looking around at the formal setting with confusion. "A board meeting," Malik repeated, taking his seat with the others. "Because we have some official business to discuss." Jamal slid a beautifully crafted wooden plaque across the table toward her. The brass nameplate read, "CEO Emeritus, Loretta Johnson, the heart that built this." Loretta stared at the plaque, then at her boys, then back at the plaque. "What is this supposed to mean?" "It means," Andre said, his voice gentle but serious, "that officially, legally, and in every way that matters, you are the founding inspiration of this company. We've been planning this for years, Mama," Tyrone added. "Every legal document, every business filing, every incorporation paper, your name is on all of it." Malik opened a leather portfolio and spread papers across the table. "You see, when we started building this company, we realized something important. None of this would exist without you. Not just because you raised us, but because everything we've accomplished is built on the principles you taught us. So we made it official," Jamal continued. "In our corporate charter, you're listed as the founding inspiration. Every major decision gets run past the question, what would Mama Loretta do?" Loretta picked up one of the documents, her hands shaking as she tried to read the legal language. "Boys, this is sweet, but I don't understand business. I can't be your CEO anything. That's why it's CEO Emeritus," Andre explained. "It's an honorary position. You don't have to run anything or make business decisions. But legally, officially, you are the heart of this company." "There's more," Tyrone said, his voice taking on a tone she remembered from when he was about to reveal he'd gotten into mischief. "Mama, you know how we've always been vague about our jobs and our money?" She nodded, suddenly feeling like she needed to sit down even though she already was sitting. "Well, we weren't just being modest," Malik said. "We were being careful. Because we've been setting something aside for you since the day we started making real money." Andre slid another document across the table. This one had official-looking seals and signatures, and numbers that made Loretta's vision blur. "These are your shares in JLTM Group," Andre said quietly. "Shares that we've been accumulating in your name for 15 years. Loretta squinted at the paper, trying to make sense of the numbers. "What does this mean in regular people language?" The four boys exchanged glances, and Tyrone cleared his throat. "Mama, those shares are currently worth $12.4 million. The silence in the room stretched so long that Loretta could hear her own heartbeat. She looked at the paper again, then at each of her boys, then back at the paper. "12 million?" she whispered. "12.4 million," Malik corrected gently. "And growing every quarter." Loretta set the paper down and covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders began to shake, and for a moment, the boys worried they had overwhelmed her. But when she looked up, tears were streaming down her face, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. "I never wanted your money," she said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted anything from you boys except for you to grow up safe and happy and good." "We know, Mama," Tyrone said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "That's exactly why you deserve it. You gave us more than safety," Andre added. "You gave us worth. You made us believe we could be anything, do anything, become anything. And now," Jamal said, "we want to give you the security you gave us. The freedom to never worry about money, to never have to work 2 jobs, to never have to choose between paying the electric bill and buying groceries. But mostly," Malik concluded, "we want you to see what happened to the love you invested in 4 scared little boys. It multiplied, Mama. It grew into something that's helping thousands of people now." Loretta looked around the table at her 4 sons, these successful, powerful men who still called her mama and still remembered every lesson she taught them in that small house on Maple Street. $12 million, she said again, shaking her head in wonder. And that's just the beginning, Tyrone said with a grin. Mama Loretta, you're about to become very, very famous. The story broke on a Tuesday morning exactly 1 week after Loretta's return from Atlanta. She was sitting in her kitchen, still trying to process everything that had happened, when her phone started ringing. And it didn't stop. The first call was from her local newspaper, then the regional news station, then CNN, then news outlets she'd never even heard of. Somehow, word had gotten out about the 4 foster boys who'd built a business empire and made their adoptive mother a multimillionaire. Foster Moms Love Built a Business Empire, read the headline in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The article, complete with photos of JLTM Group's headquarters and childhood pictures Loretta didn't even know her boys had kept, painted a picture of love, determination, and success that captured the nation's imagination. "Ma'am, this is Rebecca Chen from Good Morning America," said one caller. "We'd love to have you on the show to tell your story." "I don't have a story," Loretta protested. "I just raised my boys the best way I knew how." But the media thought differently. Within days, her story was everywhere. Social media posts about the Mama Loretta miracle went viral. News anchors talked about her during their evening broadcasts. Her picture appeared on magazine covers at grocery store checkout lines. The attention was overwhelming, but what moved Loretta most were the personal responses. Letters arrived by the dozens from across the country. Foster parents wrote to thank her for showing them what was possible. Former foster children shared their own stories of triumph over difficult beginnings. Social workers sent notes, saying her story had given them hope during difficult days. One letter, from a teacher in Detroit, particularly touched her heart. "Mrs. Johnson, I've been teaching inner-city kids for 20 years, and some days I wonder if I'm making any difference. Your story reminded me that love planted today might not bloom for 30 years, but when it does, it can change the world." But the most emotional calls came from people she hadn't heard from in decades. "Loretta? Loretta Johnson? This is Patricia Williams. I used to be Patricia Henderson. I lived next door to you on Maple Street." Mrs. Henderson's voice was thick with emotion. "Honey, I owe you an apology. All those years ago, when you took in those boys, I thought you were making the biggest mistake of your life. I was wrong. I was so wrong." Other neighbors called too. Mrs. Thompson from 3 houses down, who remembered how Jamal used to draw pictures of her flower garden. Mr. Rodriguez from across the street, who recalled how Tyrone had helped him fix his fence even after getting in trouble for climbing it. Teachers from the boys' schools, social workers who had handled their cases, even the mail carrier who had delivered all those birthday cards over the years. "I remember those boys," said Mrs. Garcia, who had taught Malik in 5th grade. "Especially that brilliant angry little one, Malik. He was so smart it scared some people, but you could tell he was hurting inside. I always wondered what happened to him. To think he helped build a company worth hundreds of millions? Loretta, you performed a miracle." The local news station did a special segment about the Maple Street Miracle, interviewing neighbors and showing old footage of the boys at school events and community activities. Loretta watched in amazement as people shared memories she'd forgotten. Tyrone organizing a neighborhood cleanup when he was 13, Andre helping elderly residents carry their groceries, Jamal teaching art classes at the community center. But the most profound impact was yet to come. Within a month of the story breaking, JLTM Group announced its most ambitious project yet, a comprehensive program to revolutionize foster care support. They partnered with state agencies across the country to provide educational resources, mental health support, and career guidance for foster children and the families who cared for them. "We're not just writing checks," Malik explained during a press conference. "We're creating systemic change. Every foster child in our partner programs will have access to tutoring, counseling, college prep, and job training. And every foster family will have support resources they need to help these kids thrive." The Loretta Johnson Youth Academy opened its doors 6 months later in a renovated building just 2 miles from Maple Street. The facility provided after-school programs, weekend workshops, and summer camps specifically designed for foster children and at-risk youth. But what made Loretta cry happy tears was the hiring policy. More than half of the staff were former foster children themselves, successful adults who had overcome difficult beginnings and now wanted to help the next generation do the same. "We're not just helping kids," Andre explained to a reporter. "We're showing them what's possible. Every mentor, every tutor, every counselor is proof that where you start doesn't determine where you finish." The ripple effects continued to spread. Other companies began implementing similar programs. Foster care agencies reported increased interest from potential families inspired by Loretta's story. Colleges started offering specialized support programs for students from foster care backgrounds. And through it all, Loretta remained remarkably unchanged. She still lived in the same house on Maple Street, though her boys had insisted on some renovations. New plumbing, a modern kitchen, and most surprisingly, a community library built in her backyard. The Mama Loretta Community Library was stocked with thousands of books, comfortable reading chairs, and computers for homework help. Children from the neighborhood gathered there every afternoon, and Loretta found herself once again surrounded by young voices and dreams in need of nurturing. "You know what's funny?" she told a journalist who asked about her newfound wealth. "I have more money than I ever dreamed of, but I'm still doing exactly what I've always done, loving children and helping them believe in themselves." The journalist asked if she planned to retire, to travel, to enjoy her wealth. Loretta laughed, the same warm laugh that had comforted 4 scared boys 30 years earlier. "Honey, when you find your purpose in life, retirement isn't about stopping work. It's about having the resources to do more of what you love." She gestured toward the library, where a group of 8-year-olds were sprawled on bean bags reading picture books while their older siblings worked on homework at the computer stations. "Besides," she added with a smile, "my boys taught me something important. When you lift others, you don't just change their lives. You change your own too. And I'm not done changing lives yet." The story had come full circle, but Loretta Johnson's impact was just beginning to spread in ways that would touch lives for generations to come. The invitation was the most beautiful thing Loretta had ever received. Embossed gold lettering on ivory paper, sealed with the JLTM Group logo, and delivered by hand on a crisp October morning exactly 30 years after 4 scared boys had first walked through her front door. "The honor of your presence is requested at the inaugural Mama Loretta Legacy Gala, celebrating 30 years of love, growth, and lifting others." The Atlanta ballroom where the gala was held could have housed her entire neighborhood. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in gold and burgundy, the colors Loretta had always loved. But what took her breath away wasn't the elegant decor, it was the people. Hundreds of faces filled the room, and as Loretta made her entrance in the beautiful dress her boys had insisted on buying her, she began to recognize them. Former foster children, now doctors, teachers, business owners, and artists. Social workers who had been inspired to stay in the field because of her story. Foster families who had opened their homes after reading about the Maple Street miracle. At the head table sat her 4 boys, now men in their 40s but still beaming at her with the same love and pride they'd shown as children. Jamal had designed the entire event, his artistic vision evident in every beautiful detail. Tyrone had coordinated with contacts around the world to bring people from as far as Japan and Germany. Malik had managed the technology that would broadcast the event live to JLTM offices globally. Andre had handled every logistical detail with the quiet efficiency that had become his trademark. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tyrone announced as the room quieted. 30 years ago tonight, 4 broken boys met a woman who changed everything. Tonight, we celebrate not just what she gave us, but what she's given to all of you. The program was a journey through time. Current foster children performed a song Jamal had written about finding hope in unexpected places. Young adults who had graduated from JLTM programs shared stories of their achievements. Business leaders spoke about how the company's model had inspired their own philanthropic efforts. But the most powerful moment came when the lights dimmed and a massive screen descended from the ceiling. "We wanted to show you something, Mama," Andre said softly into his microphone. "Something we've been saving for 30 years. The video began with footage Loretta didn't even know existed. Grainy home movies the boys had secretly taken of their early years together. There she was, reading bedtime stories to 4 pajama-clad children. Teaching Tyrone to cook breakfast without burning the eggs. Helping Malik with math homework at the kitchen table. Sitting patiently while Andre struggled through his speech exercises. Displaying Jamal's latest artwork on the refrigerator like it belonged in a museum. "How did you get all this?" Loretta whispered, tears already flowing. "We started filming when we got our first video camera," Malik explained. "We knew even then that we wanted to remember everything." The video continued through their teenage years, showing graduations, birthday parties, family dinners around the small kitchen table. Then it jumped forward to show each boy's achievements, college graduations, first jobs, early business successes. But in every scene, there were photos of Loretta prominently displayed, letters from her pinned to bulletin boards, her influence evident in every major moment. The final segment showed recent footage from the JLTM programs, children learning in state-of-the-art facilities, families being reunited, young adults starting careers and building lives. The camera lingered on faces bright with hope and possibility. As the video faded, words appeared on the screen in elegant script. "Because one woman believed we were worth saving, the world became a better place." The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. But Loretta barely heard it. She was looking around the room at all these beautiful faces, people whose lives had been touched, either directly or indirectly, by love that had started in a small house on Maple Street 3 decades ago. When the applause finally died down, she stood slowly and walked to the microphone. The room fell silent. Hundreds of people waiting to hear from the woman whose story had inspired them all. "I look out at all of you," she began, her voice strong despite her tears, "and I see something beautiful. I see proof that love is the most powerful force in the world. Not because it's easy, but because it multiplies." She paused, looking directly at her 4 sons. 30 years ago, people told me I was crazy to take in 4 boys nobody wanted. They said I didn't have enough money, enough space, enough experience. And they were right about all of that. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. But what they didn't understand is that love doesn't require perfect circumstances. It just requires a willing heart. I didn't save these boys. She gestured toward Jamal, Tyrone, Malik, and Andre. They saved me. They taught me that family isn't about blood or perfect conditions. It's about choosing to believe in each other. Her voice grew stronger. And tonight, looking at all of you, the teachers, the social workers, the foster families, the young people who refuse to let their beginnings define their endings, I see that the love we shared has grown beyond anything I ever imagined possible. She walked over to her sons, and they stood to embrace her in the same group hug that had been their signature since they were children. "I didn't save you," she whispered to them, but her words were picked up by the microphone and echoed through the room. "You saved me too." As the gala ended and people began to leave, Loretta found herself surrounded by a new generation of children. Foster kids from the JLTM programs, shy but curious, wanting to meet the woman they'd heard so much about. She knelt down to their level, just as she had with 4 scared boys 30 years ago, and saw in their eyes the same mixture of hope and fear, dreams and uncertainty. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked a little girl who couldn't have been more than 8. "Maria," the girl whispered. "Are you really Mama Loretta?" "I'm just Loretta," she replied with a warm smile. "But if you'd like, you can call me Mama." Above them, a mural had been unveiled during the evening, a beautiful painting of Loretta reading to 4 young boys, with the words, "Because love multiplies," written in elegant script below. The story that had begun with one woman's faith and 4 unwanted children had grown into a legacy that would touch lives for generations to come. And in a ballroom in Atlanta, surrounded by hundreds of people whose lives had been changed by love, Loretta Johnson finally understood the true power of what she had always called just doing what any mother would do. The circle was complete, but the story would never end. Because love, once planted, grows forever.